Greetings, seekers of the dark, and welcome to Occultic Abyss. Tonight, we cross into the abyss itself, a land haunted by 12 abyssal beasts. Each step could awaken a hellhound, summon a shadow wolf, or draw the attention of an infernal devil. The stories you've heard are only warnings. The truth is far more terrifying. Enter if you dare, but remember, once the shadows claim you, there is no escape.
The wind howled through the gnarled branches of the forgotten valley, carrying whispers of long-dead souls and the stench of rot. This place was no ordinary forest. It was a scar on the world, a hollow where light seemed to die before it touched the ground. The villagers called it the Abyss, and for generations they had spoken of the 12 beasts that ruled its shadows. 5 hellhounds with eyes like molten fire, for shadow wolves that moved unseen through darkness, and 3 infernal devils whose hunger could devour not just flesh, but the very soul. No one dared enter after sunset, yet here I was, drawn by curiosity and the thrill of forbidden knowledge, the mist curling around my ankles like the fingers of the dead. The trees twisted and leaned as if they were alive, their bark scratched with deep, jagged lines that seemed to form words no one could read, the wind echoing laughter or warnings, I could not tell which. Somewhere in the distance a low growl rolled across the valley, a sound that carried weight, intention, malice. The hairs on the back of my neck rose as I took another step. Then came the first howl, sharp, piercing, unnatural, a sound that did not belong to any animal I had known. It split the silence and sent a shiver through my bones, and in that moment I felt it, eyes watching, tracking, waiting. Shadows shifted at the corner of my vision, and though I turned my head, there was nothing there, yet I knew the forest was alive, and the creatures were not far. Every instinct screamed to run, but the path ahead was a lure, winding deeper, pulling me toward something I could not name, something ancient, cruel, and hungry. A sudden crack echoed through the fog, a branch snapping under invisible weight, and then another howl, closer now, accompanied by the faint sound of claws dragging across the soil, deliberate, patient, calculating. I stumbled forward, heart hammering, lungs burning, but still I could not stop. The stories I had scoffed at as a child, tales of the cursed beasts, the devils that toyed with men, the wolves that could slip through shadows, suddenly every word made sense. This was no legend. The air thickened, oppressive, smelling of sulfur and iron, and I realized the forest itself was a prison, a trap, and I had stepped inside its jaws. Somewhere behind me, something moved, something massive, silent, watching. A low growl rumbled through the earth, vibrating beneath my feet, and I knew that the first of the 12 had awakened. The hellhounds, the shadow wolves, and the devils, they were stirring, their senses drawn to me like predators to a wounded animal, and the valley, the abyss, exhaled a cold, fetid breath, welcoming me to a nightmare that had been waiting centuries to awaken. The sun had vanished behind a wall of rotting clouds, leaving the valley shrouded in a gray, suffocating gloom. Each step I took sank into the cold, damp earth, and the mist thickened around me like a living thing, curling around my legs, whispering secrets I could not understand. The trees leaned inward, their twisted limbs forming grotesque arches that seemed to trap me in a cathedral of shadows, their bark rough as bone and slick with moisture. Every sound was magnified. The snap of a twig, the distant drip of water, the rustle of leaves that weren't moved by wind. Then I heard it, a soft, deliberate padding, too heavy to be a fox, too silent to be a deer. My heart froze as my eyes scanned the gloom, and there, just beyond the edge of my lantern's flickering light, 2 glowing embers watched me from the mist. Shadow wolves. They moved with impossible grace, their forms almost blending into the darkness, their eyes cold and calculating, unblinking, patient. I thought I saw them vanish only to reappear elsewhere, circling, stalking, always on the edge of perception. I forced myself forward, telling myself it was a trick of the fog, yet every instinct screamed that the forest itself had a will, and it wanted me here, alone, afraid, exposed. Then came the smell, sulfur and decay, the acrid scent of something otherworldly, something that did not belong to this realm. The ground trembled faintly underfoot, and from the darkness ahead, a low growl rolled through the mist, resonant, almost intelligent, a warning or a challenge, I could not tell. The path twisted unnaturally, as if it had no beginning or end, guiding me deeper, and shadows flickered where no light could reach, forming shapes that twisted and writhed before dissolving back into blackness. A sudden crack of a branch, a hiss in the wind, and I realized I was being watched not just by beasts, but by something that lurked above, in the air itself. Infernal devils. Their presence pressed on me like a weight, a heatless fire that raised goosebumps along my arms and made my chest tighten. Every instinct told me to turn back, yet my legs moved forward as if compelled, drawn by curiosity, arrogance, or madness. A faint whisper threaded through the mist, words I could not fully comprehend, a promise or a threat, something that gnawed at the edges of my mind, making me question my senses, my sanity, my reality. The Hellhounds came next, glimpses of massive, coal-black forms flashing through the fog, eyes like molten lava, teeth glinting, paws crushing the earth with silent, terrifying power. Their howls pierced the cold air, a chorus of rage and hunger echoing off the rocks and trees, bouncing back to me in a disorienting cacophony that seemed to originate from everywhere and nowhere. I stumbled, panic rising, every shadow a threat, every rustle a predator. The forest was no longer a collection of trees. It had become a maze, a living thing that bent space and light, drawing me deeper into its heart, toward a place where 12 ancient, hungry beasts awaited, each one a nightmare-given form, each one sensing my fear, drinking from it, growing stronger. I realized then, with a cold, hollow certainty, that the abyss did not simply want trespassers. It needed them. And as darkness fell fully, swallowing the last remnants of day, I understood that the hunt had begun, and I was already too far inside the forest to escape. Somewhere in the swirling mist, eyes glowed, claws scraped, and whispers laughed. The 12 were awake, and I had become prey. The fog had thickened into a wall, pressing against my skin, clinging to my hair, filling my lungs with a chill that burned as I breathed. Every step I took was uncertain, the forest floor treacherous, roots twisting like serpents beneath my feet, ready to trip me into the unknown. Then I heard it, low, deliberate breathing, closer than it should have been, yet silent enough that it felt as though it came from inside my skull. I froze. My lantern flickered, the light trembling as if it sensed the presence of something unnatural lurking just beyond its reach. Then I saw them, moving at the edges of the glow, shapes darker than the shadows themselves, eyes glimmering like embers in a cold hearth, and I knew, with a horror that gripped my soul, that these were no ordinary beasts. The Hellhounds emerged first, massive, hulking creatures with black fur that seemed to absorb light, eyes burning with a fire that was not their own. Each step they took silent yet heavy, shaking the earth beneath me. Their heads lowered, nostrils flaring, and I felt the weight of their hunger, their intelligence, their hatred. They were hunters, predators of the ancient kind, and I was the prey. Before I could move, the shadow wolves circled from all directions, their bodies fluid, almost smoke-like, merging with darkness and reappearing where they should not have been, teeth bared, fangs dripping with shadow, jaws opening impossibly wide, snapping at the air and at fear itself. A scream rose from deep in my chest, choking and primal, but it seemed to vanish in the mist, unheard, as though the forest swallowed my voice, leaving only my terror behind. The infernal devils were next, silhouettes that shimmered against the fog, grotesque and inhuman, horns curling like twisted iron, claws long and jagged, eyes empty voids that stared into my mind, seeking weakness, doubt, despair. They spoke without words, voices like gravel and fire echoing inside my skull, telling me that resistance was useless, that the abyss demanded payment, and I was the currency. My legs betrayed me, trembling, moving on autopilot as the beasts drew closer. I could feel the heat of the Hellhound's eyes, smell the sulphurous stench of the devils, hear the whispering growls of the shadow wolves circling, always circling. I stumbled backward, fell into a hollow, and the mist swallowed me, yet the noises of pursuit did not stop. The growls became roars, shadows lunged and twisted through the fog, claws tore at bark and earth as if tearing the world itself apart to reach me. Every instinct screamed to run, but there was no path left, no way out, only the inevitable closing of 12 predators, each one attuned to my fear, feeding from it, growing stronger with each heartbeat. The first hellhound lunged, jaws snapping inches from my arm, teeth glittering with something dark and wet, the sound like a scream fused with metal. I scrambled, lantern swinging, light flickering across twisted trees, catching brief glimpses of eyes, fur, horns, fangs, and then shadows swallowed them again. A howl erupted, deafening, coming from nowhere and everywhere at once, shaking the fog, rattling my teeth, vibrating through my chest, and I realized that the beasts were not just physical, they were a force, a manifestation of the forest's hunger, its curse, its ancient wrath. I tried to scream, tried to run, but the forest shifted, roots wrapping around my ankles, mist choking my vision, and in the corner of my eye, I saw a figure that should not have existed, half man, half devil, eyes blazing black, raising a claw to the sky, summoning the hellhounds and shadow wolves into frenzied, coordinated madness. Panic clawed at my mind as the 12 beasts converged, circling, snapping, growling, and I understood with cold, hopeless clarity that the first encounter was only a taste, a warning, a test, and that the real terror had only just begun. The fog thickened until it became a living wall, pressing against me, cold and wet, smelling faintly of decay and burnt earth. Every shadow seemed to twitch, shift, breathe, and I knew that the 12 abyssal beasts were no longer just at the edges of the light. They were everywhere, unseen, watching, waiting. The forest had changed. It was no longer a place of trees, roots, and mist. It had become a labyrinth, a breathing entity whose corridors twisted impossibly, leading me always deeper, always toward them. Footsteps echoed behind me, soft, deliberate, and yet when I turned, the space behind me was empty. A rustle here, a low growl there, the faint snap of a branch, and I felt the gaze of the shadow wolves, circling, testing, learning, their teeth glinting in the gaps of fog. The hellhounds prowled silently, their massive forms slipping between trees, eyes molten fire that burned into my mind, each step sending tremors through my bones. Somewhere above, a demon stirred, its wings rustling in a sound that was not quite wind, not quite wings, and I felt it observing, orchestrating, its presence a heavy, oppressive weight that made my chest tighten. Every instinct screamed to stop, to run, to scream, but the forest swallowed sound, twisted paths, and even light seemed bent to its will. I stumbled over roots, my lantern flickering, and in that brief flare of flame, I saw a hellhound vanish into shadow, only to reappear behind me, eyes blazing, jaws snapping, but when I whirled around, there was nothing. The shadow wolves whispered at the edge of hearing, a low, sibilant sound like teeth scraping across stone, voices speaking words I almost understood, promising death, promising torment, promising that once the forest had tasted my fear, it would never let me go. The infernal devils moved silently, grotesque forms sliding through the mist, claws scraping against bark, horns cutting through fog like jagged knives, eyes locked on mine, reading my terror, feeding from it, shaping it into chains that bound me to this place. Every direction I looked, I felt pressure, a weight on my shoulders, on my mind. I realized the pursuit was not physical alone. It was mental, psychic, a slow, relentless pressure that made every movement heavy, every breath shallow, every thought laced with despair. The beasts had me inside a web, each step I took pulling me further into the trap, further from escape, further into madness. Then came the howls, a chorus of hellhounds, the low growls of shadow wolves, and the deep, rumbling laughter of the devils. The sound wrapped around me, vibrated through the mist, a tide of darkness pressing in. I tried to call out, but my voice came out a strangled whisper. The forest seemed alive, roots wrapping around ankles, branches tugging at clothes, mist curling into claws, pushing me forward, into the waiting jaws of 12 creatures that did not need to be seen to strike terror. Every moment stretched into an eternity. I could feel them closing in, could hear their thoughts in the whispers of the wind, the scraping of claws across stone, the beating of wings overhead. I ran blindly, stumbling, falling, rising, but the path never ended, the trees never ceased, and the mist never thinned. And in that endless pursuit, I understood with bone-deep certainty, I was prey, hunted not just by 12 beasts, but by the forest itself, by shadows, by ancient hunger, by something eternal and malevolent that had waited centuries to awaken, and I had become its latest victim. The forest had grown impossibly silent, the kind of silence that pressed against my ears and made every heartbeat thunder in my skull. The mist hung thick, heavy, and cold, curling around me like grasping hands, and I knew the 12 abyssal beasts were near, stalking, waiting, and testing me. The shadow wolves' whispers had faded, their eyes barely glimpsed in the fog, the hellhounds' molten gaze still burning at the corners of perception, but now, something worse emerged. From the center of the valley, a heatless fire ignited the fog, glowing dimly at first, then flaring into shapes grotesque and impossible. The infernal devils appeared. They stepped from the mist like nightmares made flesh, hulking and humanoid, yet twisted, horns curling from their skulls like jagged iron, claws serrated and blackened, eyes hollow voids that devoured all light. Their skin shimmered with unnatural textures, as though molten rock and shadow had fused, and their movement was unnervingly fluid, predatory, like a panther that had learned to walk on two legs. When they spoke, it was without sound, yet the words crawled inside my mind, scraping sanity raw, promising torment, promising despair, promising that my very soul was theirs to play with. The hellhounds flanked them now, fire in their eyes brighter, growls rolling from deep throats that seemed to shake the earth. The shadow wolves circled higher, moving like smoke, merging with the fog, their teeth glinting, fangs that seemed to pierce both light and thought. I realized, with a bone-deep horror, that these infernal devils were not simply beasts. They were commanders, orchestrators, masters of the 12, and the hellhounds and shadow wolves obeyed without hesitation. Every instinct screamed to flee, but the forest had shifted. Paths twisted, roots rose like barricades, fog thickened, and I felt the pull of something ancient, malignant, tethering me here, forcing me to face them. One devil stepped forward, claw raised, and the air itself seemed to vibrate, thick with an energy that turned breath to lead, eyes to glass, limbs to stone. The fog parted unnaturally around it, revealing glimpses of the other 5 beasts lurking behind, waiting for the signal, and I understood that they had been watching, waiting for the perfect moment. Then the air shimmered, and illusions danced, shadows of friends who had long since fled or been lost, voices I thought I recognized calling my name, urging me forward, tempting me, teasing my fear, each one a trap, each one a weapon. The infernal devils moved with precision, stalking the edges of perception, testing, gauging, striking at the edges of my mind. The hellhounds lunged from the mist, teeth snapping, claws gouging at the earth, but they paused, obedient to the devil's silent command. I realized that physical force was meaningless. The forest, the beasts, the devils, they existed outside the normal laws of the world. I was prey in a realm that had no mercy, no escape, and the longer I looked into the devil's hollow eyes, the more I felt my fear being consumed, transformed into something tangible, something the 12 could manipulate, twist, and use against me. Panic surged as I ran blindly, mist curling around my face, roots tangling my feet, every sense screaming that I was surrounded, hunted, and snared. And in the center of the fog, the infernal devils waited, patiently, deliberately, their claws tracing invisible patterns in the air, summoning the shadow wolves and hellhounds into synchronized terror. Their presence alone warped the forest, distorted sound, twisted light, and made the world itself feel like it was closing in. I understood then that the true horror was not just their hunger. It was their intelligence, their ancient malevolence, their ability to manipulate fear itself into a weapon. Every heartbeat was a countdown, every breath a step closer to annihilation, and I realized with icy certainty that once the infernal devils had marked me, nothing in this world, or any other, could save me. The forest had grown impossibly silent, the kind of silence that pressed against my ears and made every heartbeat thunder in my skull. The mist hung thick, heavy, and cold, curling around me like grasping hands, and I knew the 12 abyssal beasts were near, stalking, waiting, and testing me. The Shadow Wolves' whispers had faded, their eyes barely glimpsed in the fog, the Hellhounds' molten gaze still burning at the corners of perception, but now, something worse emerged. From the center of the valley, a heatless fire ignited the fog, glowing dimly at first, then flaring into shapes grotesque and impossible. The Infernal Devils appeared. They stepped from the mist like nightmares made flesh, hulking and humanoid, yet twisted, horns curling from their skulls like jagged iron, claws serrated and blackened, eyes hollow voids that devoured all light. Their skin shimmered with unnatural textures, as though molten rock and shadow had fused, and their movement was unnervingly fluid, predatory, like a panther that had learned to walk on two legs. When they spoke, it was without sound, yet the words crawled inside my mind, scraping sanity raw, promising torment, promising despair, promising that my very soul was theirs to play with. The Hellhounds flanked them now, fire in their eyes brighter, growls rolling from deep throats that seemed to shake the earth. The Shadow Wolves circled higher, moving like smoke, merging with the fog, their teeth glinting, fangs that seemed to pierce both light and thought. I realized, with a bone-deep horror, that these infernal devils were not simply beasts. They were commanders, orchestrators, masters of the 12, and the Hellhounds and Shadow Wolves obeyed without hesitation. Every instinct screamed to flee, but the forest had shifted. Paths twisted, roots rose like barricades, fog thickened, and I felt the pull of something ancient, malignant, tethering me here, forcing me to face them. One devil stepped forward, claw raised, and the air itself seemed to vibrate, thick with an energy that turned breath to lead, eyes to glass, limbs to stone. The fog parted unnaturally around it, revealing glimpses of the other 5 beasts lurking behind, waiting for the signal, and I understood that they had been watching, waiting for the perfect moment. Then the air shimmered, and illusions danced, shadows of friends who had long since fled or been lost, voices I thought I recognized calling my name, urging me forward, tempting me, teasing my fear, each one a trap, each one a weapon. The infernal devils moved with precision, stalking the edges of perception, testing, gauging, striking at the edges of my mind. The Hellhounds lunged from the mist, teeth snapping, claws gouging at the earth, but they paused, obedient to the devil's silent command. I realized that physical force was meaningless. The forest, the beasts, the devils, they existed outside the normal laws of the world. I was prey in a realm that had no mercy, no escape, and the longer I looked into the devil's hollow eyes, the more I felt my fear being consumed, transformed into something tangible, something the 12 could manipulate, twist, and use against me. Panic surged as I ran blindly, mist curling around my face, roots tangling my feet, every sense screaming that I was surrounded, hunted, and snared. And in the center of the fog, the infernal devils waited, patiently, deliberately, their claws tracing invisible patterns in the air, summoning the Shadow Wolves and Hellhounds into synchronized terror. Their presence alone warped the forest, distorted sound, twisted light, and made the world itself feel like it was closing in. I understood then that the true horror was not just their hunger. It was their intelligence, their ancient malevolence, their ability to manipulate fear itself into a weapon. Every heartbeat was a countdown, every breath a step closer to annihilation, and I realized with icy certainty that once the infernal devils had marked me, nothing in this world, or any other, could save me. The deeper I pressed into the abyss, the more I understood the true cost of curiosity. The forest no longer felt like a place I had entered. It had become a predator itself, bending shadows and mist to punish my arrogance. The 12 Abyssal Beasts had not merely followed. They had been waiting, testing, drawing me in, feeding on the flickering hope that I might survive. The Shadow Wolves glided unseen through darkness, their fangs dripping shadow, circling with patience only a predator could know, and every whisper of wind carried their mocking voices, taunting me, promising torment. The Hellhounds' glowing eyes tracked me relentlessly, jaws snapping at empty air, yet I could smell the sulfur that clung to their fur, feel the heatless fire of their hatred pressing into my bones. And the infernal devils, they had fully revealed themselves now, stepping from the fog like demons born from the cracks of hell itself, each movement deliberate, each gaze a blade slicing through the veil of sanity. I realized, with a crushing, bone-deep certainty, that the forest demanded more than fear, it demanded payment. The price of stepping into the abyss was not mere survival, it was blood, soul, and sanity. One by one, I saw the consequences of those who had come before me. Shadowed forms that resembled people, twisted and hollow-eyed, trapped between life and death, wandering endlessly, whispering warnings I could barely comprehend. I glimpsed shapes that had once been men and women, now grotesque mockeries, limbs bent impossibly, eyes burning with knowledge too terrible to bear. Their presence was a warning, a lesson, yet even understanding it did not protect me. Every step carried the weight of their failures, their screams echoing in my mind, a constant reminder that the beasts punished curiosity with precision. I stumbled over a root, and the mist shifted around me like hands reaching, clawing, pulling. The infernal devils raised claws to the sky, and the hellhounds responded with synchronized growls, a chorus of hunger and rage that resonated through the earth, vibrating through my chest, twisting my stomach with dread. The shadow wolves lunged from above and beside me, fangs sinking into the fog itself, tearing at my perception, my sense of reality unraveling. I felt the pull of despair, the weight of hopelessness pressing so hard I thought my chest would collapse. Every instinct screamed to run, yet I understood that running alone would not save me, knowledge alone would not save me. The forest demanded more. It demanded submission, a surrender to fear so complete that the beasts could consume and shape it, making prey malleable to their will. In that instant, I realized the truth. The forest was not merely hunting the body, it was hunting the mind, the soul, the spark of defiance that led one to enter this cursed place. And as the mist thickened, the whispers grew louder, the growls rolled from unseen depths, and the hollow eyes of the devils bored into my very being, I understood with cold certainty that the price of curiosity was survival itself, and even survival might not be enough to escape what the abyss had claimed. The 12 abyssal beasts were patient. They were eternal. They were masters of the punishment that curiosity alone had brought upon me, and I knew, with terror that sank to the marrow of my bones, that whatever hope I clung to now would be tested in ways I could not yet imagine, and some of the debts I would pay were eternal, written not in ink, but in blood, shadow, and soul. The abyss had fully claimed the forest now, twisting every shadow, every root, every wisp of fog into a trap designed for one purpose: my annihilation. The 12 abyssal beasts, hellhounds, shadow wolves, and infernal devils, had gathered, no longer hidden, no longer patient. Their eyes burned with hunger and intelligence, their bodies poised like predators ready to strike, and the air itself hummed with the oppressive weight of their collective malevolence. The hellhounds crouched low, muscles coiled, eyes molten fire, teeth bared, growls vibrating through the ground beneath me, the sound so deep it felt like the forest itself was roaring. The shadow wolves circled overhead, twisting through shadows like smoke, fangs dripping darkness, silent hunters that could strike anywhere at any time, their forms blending with the mist, making the fog feel alive, sentient, filled with intent. And the infernal devils. They were monstrous beyond comprehension, towering, horned, claws gleaming black, eyes that swallowed hope itself. Each step they took warped the mist, bending light and reality around them, a dance of horror and inevitability. I tried to run, tried to escape, but the forest had no exit. Paths twisted and doubled back, roots rose like barricades, fog formed walls, and I felt myself herded toward the center of the abyss, toward the place where all 12 beasts waited. Heart hammering, breath ragged, I understood that I could not outrun them, could not fight them with steel or fire, for their strength was beyond any natural force. They were manifestations of the forest's ancient hunger, feeding on fear, shaping reality, bending shadows into weapons. The hellhounds lunged, claws tearing into earth, teeth snapping inches from my flesh. The shadow wolves pounced from unseen angles, jaws slicing through fog, teeth grazing, leaving trails of shadow that seemed to writhe and reach for me long after they passed. The infernal devils stepped forward, summoning the others into frenzied coordination, their voices, silent yet deafening, piercing my mind, promising pain, promising death, promising eternal torment. Every instinct screamed to surrender, yet surrender would be no release. It would be a slow, agonizing, unmaking body and mind consumed by their intelligence, cruelty, and hunger. I stumbled, rolled, dove into a hollow, the lantern shattering, fire sputtering, and for a brief moment, darkness swallowed me. But in that darkness, I could feel them closing in, their presence pressing into every nerve, every thought, every heartbeat. I raised my arms, swung blindly, screamed into the void, but the world had become a hunting ground of despair, a theater of terror in which I was both spectator and victim. The Hellhounds' jaws snapped at my heels, the Shadow Wolves' teeth raked my shoulders, the Infernal Devils' claws traced patterns in the air, carving agony into the very fog. Time lost meaning, seconds stretched into eternities. Pain, fear, and adrenaline merged, warping perception until I could feel my sanity fraying at the edges. Yet in the chaos, in the very eye of this orchestrated horror, I glimpsed the terrible truth. The beasts were not mindless. They were precise, calculating, playing with me, shaping my terror, testing the limits of despair, feeding from my desperation. Every scream I could not make, every breath I choked, every shadow that lunged at me was a note in their symphony of horror. And then, amidst the chaos, a fleeting moment of clarity. A chance to survive, a chance to escape, a chance to outlast their hunger if only I could endure long enough, move fast enough, think beyond fear. But as I ran, stumbled, fell, clawed through the mist, I knew with bone-deep certainty that this confrontation was not merely a battle. It was an initiation, a punishment, a trial that could break me, consume me, erase me from the world. The 12 abyssal beasts closed in, growls and whispers and shadows pressing together, the forest alive with their malevolence, and I realized that survival would demand more than courage. It would demand confronting the very essence of fear itself, facing the ancient hunger of hellhounds, shadow wolves, and infernal devils, and emerging from the abyss of darkness either broken or transformed forever. Dawn never truly came to the abyss. The fog thinned only enough to mock me, revealing twisted, skeletal trees, roots clawing out of the earth like the hands of the dead, and the faint echoes of growls and whispers that lingered long after the beasts themselves had vanished from sight. I stumbled forward, body bruised, lungs burning, skin scraped raw, yet every step felt heavier than the last, as though the forest itself had bound me, tattooing its curse onto my soul. The 12 abyssal beasts, the hellhounds, the shadow wolves, and the infernal devils, were gone, or so I thought, but their presence lingered in every shadow, every twisted branch, every flicker of fog. I could still feel their eyes on me, molten fire, abyssal black, hollow voids of ancient malice, and I realized with a chill that the hunt was not over. Somewhere deep within me, a spark of what I had been, fear, arrogance, curiosity, had been consumed, replaced with a hollow resonance of the forest, a tether to the abyss itself. Every whispered wind, every shifting shadow, carried their hunger, and I understood that the 12 were patient. They did not need to kill at once. They could wait, bide time, draw out torment across years, decades, centuries, and the memory of what I had seen and felt would forever bind me to their power. The sun, a pale, distant circle, did nothing to dispel the shadows in my mind. Every step away from the forest was haunted. Every sound echoed with growls, every corner of light seemed invaded by darkness. I glimpsed my reflection in a pool, and for a moment, I did not recognize myself, eyes wide, hollowed, carrying the knowledge that some part of me had been left behind, claimed by the abyss, feeding the 12 beasts, marking me for eternity. The forest whispered my name in the voices of the lost, the damned, those who had entered before me and failed, and I realized the forest itself had grown hungrier, stronger, because I had trespassed. And as I emerged from the mist, stumbling onto familiar earth, the valley behind me silent and still, I knew the truth. The 12 abyssal beasts would wait, always, in the fog, in the shadows, in the gaps between worlds, patient, eternal, and the curse would linger in anyone who dared remember. For curiosity was a trap, fear was their feast, and the abyss never forgets. Even now, I can feel it, whispering, watching, promising that the 12 will rise again, and the shadows I fled from will one day find me where I least expect it, and no dawn will save me.